Imagine the most powerful empire in the Islamic world, cities larger than London, trade routes connecting China to the Mediterranean, an army so vast its ruler believed no enemy could ever reach him. It was gone in 3 years, not slowly weakened, not gradually eroded, obliterated. Between 1218 and 1221, Genghis Khan launched a campaign so swift, so strategically brilliant, and so devastatingly complete that historians still struggle to explain how it happened. This is that story. And it didn't begin with armies. It began with a trade caravan. When we talk about Genghis Khan expanding west, we need to stop and ask, west from where? West toward what? Because in 1218, west did not mean Paris or London or Rome. To the Mongols, west meant something far more valuable. It meant the Silk Road, the greatest commercial artery in human history. It meant cities so rich that a single market district generated more revenue than some entire kingdoms. It meant Persia. And standing between Genghis Khan and all of that was the Khwarazmian Empire. By 1218, Genghis Khan had already done the impossible. He had unified the fractious Mongol tribes. He had crushed the Jin dynasty of northern China. His eastern borders were stable, but to his west sprawled this enormous Islamic empire, ruled by Shah Muhammad II of Khwarazm, stretching across what is today Uzbekistan, Turkmenistan, Iran, Afghanistan, and parts of Kazakhstan. Its cities were legendary. Bukhara, a center of Islamic scholarship. Samarkand, the Shah's glittering capital. Merv, one of the largest cities on earth. Nishapur, a jewel of Persian civilization. These weren't frontier outposts. These were the cultural and economic capitals of the medieval world. So what triggered the war? One governor's terrible decision. Here's something most people don't know. Genghis Khan didn't want war with the Khwarazmian Empire. At least, not yet. In 1218, he sent a trade caravan west, hundreds of merchants carrying silver, silk, and other goods, an official overture from the Mongol Empire to the Khwarazmian court. It was a diplomatic gesture. It became a death sentence. When the caravan reached the border city of Otrar, a fortified trading hub on the Sirdarya River, the governor in Alshuk made a fateful call. He accused the merchants of being spies. He had them all executed. Genghis Khan's response was measured at first. He sent envoys to the Shah demanding justice, demanding the governor be handed over. The Shah had a choice. He made the wrong one. He executed the lead envoy. He humiliated and expelled the others, reportedly shaving their heads and burning off their beards before sending them back. For Genghis Khan, this was not an insult. It was a declaration of war. The Shah had just signed the death warrant of his own empire. He just didn't know it yet. In 1219, the Mongol army marched west. But here's what made this campaign unlike anything the medieval world had ever seen. They didn't march as one army. They split. The Shah's defensive strategy was logical, on paper. He dispersed his enormous forces across his major cities, betting that strong walls would bleed the Mongols dry. Genghis Khan turned that logic into a trap. Rather than following the predictable Silk Road routes that the Shah's armies watched and prepared for, the Mongol forces fractured into multiple columns, each striking from a different direction. One force moved along the Sirdarya River toward Otrar, the city where it all began. Another drove for the city of Gend. A third column, and this is the part that stunned the defenders, crossed the Kizilkum Desert. The Kizilkum Desert, a vast, scorching expanse of sand and scrub that the Khwarazmians had written off as impassable. Armies didn't cross the Kizilkum. It was a geographic barrier, a wall of nature that replaced the need for soldiers. The Mongols walked through it, and when they emerged on the other side, directly behind the defensive lines the Shah had so carefully arranged, the psychological collapse had already begun. But the real genius was yet to come. Bukhara was more than a city. It was the soul of the Islamic East. Centuries of scholarship, magnificent mosques, a population of scholars, merchants, and craftsmen who represented the highest achievements of Islamic civilization. In 1220, the Mongols arrived. The Shah's defensive logic, scatter the army, hold the cities, was now revealed as catastrophic. Without a concentrated field army to meet the Mongols before the walls, the garrison was on its own. A portion of the garrison tried to break out. They were destroyed in the open field. The rest surrendered. Genghis Khan reportedly rode into the great mosque of Bukhara, climbed the pulpit, and announced to the assembled people, "I am the punishment of God. If you had not committed great sins, God would not have sent a punishment like me upon you." Whether those exact words were spoken, we can't be certain. What happened next, we can. Parts of the city were burned. Thousands were enslaved or killed. The great center of Islamic scholarship was reduced to ash and rubble, and the Mongols had proven something that would shake every city between here and the Caucasus. No wall was high enough. No army was strong enough. The road to Samarkand was open. Samarkand was supposed to be different. The Shah's own capital, set in the lush Zaravshan Valley, ringed by massive walls, garrisoned by a force that included war elephants, the tanks of the medieval world. Samarkand had every reason to hold. It fell in days. Why? Part of the garrison tried to sortie, to attack the Mongols outside the walls. They were methodically cut down. The war elephants, terrified by the chaos, turned and trampled their own men. Then the defenders began to defect. Officers surrendered. Religious leaders negotiated. The city that was meant to be the empire's anchor became proof of its unraveling. With Samarkand taken, the Mongols now controlled Transoxiana, the entire region between the Amu Darya and Sir Darya rivers. Central Asia had changed hands. But where was the Shah? While his cities burned, Shah Muhammad II did something that destroyed the last hope of organized resistance. He ran, not to rally his forces, not to mount a counteroffensive. He fled westward, city to city, always one step ahead of Mongol pursuit, moving through Persia toward the Caspian Sea, his empire crumbling behind him with every step. Genghis Khan's response was almost elegant in its cruelty. He sent his two greatest generals, Subutai and Jebe, with a flying force of around 30,000 cavalry. Their mission? Hunt him down. What followed was one of the most extraordinary military chases in history, a pursuit that would eventually carry Mongol armies further west than anyone had imagined possible. The Shah never stopped running. He died in 1220 on a small island in the Caspian Sea, stripped of everything, reportedly wearing rags borrowed from his own courtiers, having outlived his empire by only a few months, the most powerful ruler in the Islamic world, dead on an island, alone. But the destruction didn't end with him. Now the Mongols turned to Khorasan. If the fall of Bukhara and Samarkand was shocking, what happened in Khorasan was something else entirely. Merv, Nishapur, Herat, Tus. These were among the greatest cities in the medieval world, not second-tier urban centers, the very crown of Persian civilization. Merv, at its height, may have been one of the largest cities on Earth. Some estimates put its population at over 1 million. After the Mongols passed through, medieval chroniclers described the dead as uncountable. Now, we should acknowledge that medieval sources notoriously exaggerated, and modern historians debate the true scale of the casualties. But here is what is not in dispute. The Mongols didn't just conquer these cities. They systematically destroyed the infrastructure that had supported them for centuries: the Qanat irrigation networks, the water channels, the agricultural systems that turned arid land into breadbaskets. In some regions, the population wouldn't recover for 200 years. This was not war as the medieval world understood it. This was the deliberate unmaking of a civilization, and Subutai and Jebe were still riding west. With the Shah dead and the Khwarazmian state shattered, Subutai and Jebe faced a choice. They could return east. They kept going. Pushing north and west through Persia, they crossed into the Caucasus, mountains that formed one of the great geographic barriers of the medieval world. They fought the kingdom of Georgia. They clashed with the Cumans and Kipchaks of the steppe. They reached the shores of the Black Sea region. These were not full-scale conquests. They were what military historians call reconnaissance in force. But what they discovered would shape the next decade of Mongol expansion. They found the Russian steppe. They found the path to Eastern Europe. And in 1223, at the Battle of the Kalka River, they would shatter a joint Russian-Cuman force. the first collision between the Mongols and the princes of Kievan Rus. Europe had no idea what was coming. Let's step back and look at what just happened. In 1218, the Mongol Empire was a steppe power, formidable, experienced, but largely contained to Mongolia and northern China. By 1221, one of the richest empires in the Islamic world had ceased to exist. Central Asia was under Mongol control. Persia had been ravaged. Mongol scouts had crossed the Caucasus and touched the Russian steppe. 3 years. Trade routes that had connected the world for centuries were gone. Political borders that had defined the region for generations had vanished. Entire cities, centers of learning, commerce, and culture, had been turned to dust. And this was only the beginning. The storm that started at a single border city on the Sirdarya River, with a governor's foolish decision and a Shah's fatal arrogance, would not stop at Persia. It would move toward Russia, then Poland, then Hungary, and it would not stop until it stood before the walls of Vienna itself. If you want to understand how that happened, subscribe and follow the series, because the next episode is where things get very dark.